We moved here in 1958. I was about 9 years old at the time. The whole area was pristine.
This is the largest landfill in the South, right there.
Why would they do this? The other reason I came up with is money.
It's unacceptable.
They walked away from the fines, they walked away from the remediation.
The smell is like the rotten egg smell.
But it just falls on deaf ear here. We've covered it. We know.
Is something going on in Wedgwood? Quietly is it being kept?
And the county commissioners at that time selling their souls for a profit on landfills.
Bother nobody, we just want to live.
Hi, I'm Marcus Stallworth. I'm a graphic designer from San Diego, California. But originally, I'm from Pensacola, Florida. In fact, I grew up right here on this street, Lambert Street, in the Wedgwood neighborhood. I have fond memories of playing football in a place we used to call the field over on Baker Street, or walking to Wedgwood Middle School playing baseball during PE. But there's one more place I really remember vividly. It's a place all us neighborhood kids would go after school. We called it the Big Hole. But what I didn't know was that the Big Hole was actually a borrowed pit. And over the course of years, a number of landfills have moved in this neighborhood. 13, in fact, count them, 13 landfills have come into this neighborhood. How did this nice African-American neighborhood go from just a simple American dream to the new American nightmare? Well, in order to get that, we got to start from the beginning.
Well, see, now that is a good question because we don't know. We don't really know for sure how we got surrounded by 13 pits.
Well, the Wedgwood, Olive Heights, and Rolling Hill communities have been inundated with over 13 borrow pits and landfills. The people of Wedgwood, Rolling Hill, and Olive Heights have been in that community since the early 50s. And over about 25 years ago, they started bringing out and putting in borrowed pits into that community. And what they do, they come in and they use the pits to dig out sand, and they sell the sand. And once they sell the sand, then they take and bring back and start putting construction and demolition debris in the pits to fill them back up. And again, over a period of 25 years, they've put about 13 of these landfills in the community. About 8 of them are still active. And it has created major issues in the community. People have been dying due to the toxic waste that they've put into the pits. What we found was that drywall or sheetrock is one of the items that they put into the pit. And once it is wet, hydrogen sulfide is a gas that's emitted from drywall and sheetrock. And this hydrogen sulfide can create a lot of breathing problems, as well as can create a lot of cancers and other sicknesses that have happened to the individuals who've lived in this community.
When you drive down Wingfoot Way, when you get right there at the end where Wagner Road meets Wingfoot Way, there was a distinct smell in the air. And you will be like, ooh, somebody's septic tank really need to be cleaned. That's what my feelings were at that time. And then when you pass by, then it wasn't as bad. And then we found out that that was not somebody's septic tank, that was this landfill over here, smelling like that. And so then that's why the community started really fighting. So then when they started trying to get it cleaned up, so we found out that that smell was actually coming from, well, when Hurricane Ivan came through here, it was a lot of houses that had been built prior to that that had used that sheetrock that came from China. And so when they cleared those places out, they brought the sheetrock over here to this landfill. So, and then when it rained and that stuff get wet and it starts to crumble up, the smell is like the rotten egg smell. And that's where the hydrogen sulfide was coming from. Back in 2014, that's when I started helping out with the Homeowners Association with their fight against this landfill right here, the Rolling Hills C&D facility. They had been going to county commissioner meetings like for about 2 or 3 years, complaining about this landfill over here. And they were asking for a whole group of people to come one night. And I was like, when my mom was going, and I said, okay, well, I'll just go, since I live down this way. I said, well, I'll go with you and see what's really going on. And then when I went to this commissioners meeting and I'm listening to the things that the commissioners are saying and the neighbors are saying, and I'm like, is that for real, for real? And I was just totally blown away as to what I was hearing.
And thank Commissioner Lumen May and Commissioner Stephen Berry for standing up and doing the right thing for our community. We will remember you. We will not forget you when it comes time for election. We will not. But I just had to ask myself, how did this vote come down? From my understanding, the vote didn't happen last time. It did happen last time. But Wilson Robertson and Gene Valentino had pretty much already made up their mind, and that they were going to vote in favor of expanding the dump, and that we already know how Commissioner Berry and Commissioner May felt about it. So it basically came down to one vote, and that was Grover Robinson. And I for the life of me, sat there and watched the video and cannot even believe that you voted to expand the dump. I just don't understand it.
I didn't vote to expand a dump. I voted to allow the expansion of a burrow pit.
Well, you know what? Excuse me, can I speak, Mr.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Robinson?
Because I want to make sure whatever we get done is correct. Nothing debate does not happen if it becomes political and certain people have certain interests of certain candidates that are moving forward. That doesn't help this community. The community will only be done when there is honest debate, and you need to be honest in what you say.
Okay, I'm going to be honest. You can call it whatever you want. I call it expanding the dump, okay? But I just want to say that. So I'm thinking like, wow. I'm thinking to myself, why? Why would this happen? Why would these 3 county commissioners that are supposed to work for the citizens of Escambia County vote this way? And I came to the conclusion there's 2 things. One of them is that you have no heart, you have no soul, you have no compassion, no empathy for the citizens that live in these neighborhoods. And that brings me to my other thought, the other reason. Why would they do this? The other reason I came up with is money. Money. It's always about money. And I'm just questioning if you guys, I don't know, if you have some kind of ties to the dumps, why would you do this? Why? I mean, you know, let's face it, this Escambia County's got a reputation. Escambia County has a reputation for the good old boys, you know, and I just don't get it. So if it's not in your backyard, It's in Lumen's backyard. It's not, but I guarantee it, if it was in your backyards, that this wouldn't be happening. You deliberately sat there and strategically voted to expand the dump. Call it whatever you want. And I just want to come out here and say that, you know, that the county commission is supposed to work for all of Escambia County, not just your districts. So all I can say is, hey, election time is coming up. You think we're going to forget this? We're not. We're not going to forget where you stood, that you stood on the side of big business and the polluters, and that you did not stand up for the citizens of Escambia County.
Mr. Robinson.
I'd like to say something. Grandstanding don't get you anywhere, and I don't think Ms. Crummell has a thing in the world to do other than just grandstand. And when she starts blaming Grover for the oak trees, I can understand that because it was out in his district. But I don't care what you say. I'm not running for re-election. I live, Ms. Crummell. In 2 years from now. But when you start saying we don't have a heart and a soul, you're getting a little bit too low for me. Let me tell you, now I'm speaking now. You don't try to get the floor. Let me tell you something. I live probably as close to one of the worst C&D pits in the county. I live probably as close to the one on Blossom Trail as anybody out here lives around any landfill. A C&D. It is absolutely been under investigation. It's been out from under the permitting process according to DEP. It's been something that I, for 6 years, have been looking into because it's right next to my subdivision and it's in these neighborhoods that these people live in, and it's in Commissioner May's district. I will stand up with him just as much in any of those. But when you start saying a Barra pit is just as bad as a C&D pit, you don't even know what you're talking about.
You know what? Excuse me. Excuse me. There's going to be a pit, and they're going to just add to the order.
I'm going to call this to order, and I'm going to call my next speaker, Sherry.
Well, wait a minute. Now, I've got the floor, Mr. Chairman. You're not going to stop me.
Well,
Ms. Crummell, you cannot get up here and debate the county commission.
I'm going to get a point of order in this meeting, and I'm going to stop anybody that's talking because I'm the chair, and then we will proceed in an orderly and a fashionable manner.
Again, like I say, over a 25-year period, the politicians in our community have allowed this to go on.
Commissioner Lumen May and State Representative Mike Hill did a tour. They got 2 buses, 2 city buses, to come out here and pick up people, and actually did a tour to go around to see really what we had going on in our neighborhood. And when they went on this tour, they were able to go into some of the landfills here, and we were really surprised at what was really going on.
Just mining.
So when they finish mining this, what happens here? I mean, this close. What happens after this is mining?
They got to come up with a reclamation plan. What y'all were talking about a couple of weeks ago at the commission. What's the reclamation plan?
So we have no idea what we're going to do here once we mine this close to this house.
I would think they should have that plan before they started operation.
I would think.
They do.
Exactly. Well, they do submit a reclamation plan, but it's not binding until they actually propose to start the activity, which could be years and years later.
So what's the reclamation plan for this then? I mean, that's my question.
That's a good question.
I wouldn't fill it with C&D. I mean, with the lake.
But I'm saying they got something in writing that tells me what they're going to do with this right here when they finish. What they plan to do.
Got permitted for this.
They do.
It isn't necessarily what they're going to do. It's just what they plan to do.
It's unacceptable. All these pits have some type of water contamination, even they admit it. I mean, when do we make them clean it up? I mean, I understand it's going to be in this cell, but eventually it's like the erosion on the first house we saw. It keeps eroding, or contamination keeps spreading. I mean, how do we mitigate that?
Right now, and it's again, you use the example sins of your father. C&D permits back in the day did not require liners. And so it wasn't until 2010 until they changed the rule and said, you know what? There are issues even with what we call clean C&D. They're going to have things that exceed groundwater standards. So they changed the rules in 2010. But now you got this legacy of sites that have groundwater issues. And in most cases, it starts out, they get a zone of discharge, and I know this is not going to sit well. They're allowed to basically have issues right under the site. The rules allow for it. It's their zone of discharge. They're allowed to have issues, but once it starts to migrate, left, right, too far, toward the property boundary, then they have to submit a site assessment plan, a remedial action plan to the state to address those issues. And we got systems in place, but like I told you, so you're talking about systems that have to run for some length of time to address it. But
Sean, so anything can go in here. A barbecue pit can go down there, an aerosol can go down there? Nope. So why is a barbecue pit there? Why is an aerosol can in there?
Spot each one of those loads before they're dumped, somebody watches them when they dump it, and if they see stuff, it's supposed to be removed.
But so how do we stop it from going in here?
They need to have a solid concrete operation plan. This facility is not laid out the way it should be. You should be able to know exactly what type of race is going in, where it's going. The site is not laid out the way it should be. You should be able to know exactly. Spotters should be running. Okay, well, this is not right. Examining. If you ain't coming in here, it should be at that gate.
You see those bins there? That's probably all of the stuff that they did pull out.
Right.
That they supposed to have to pull that.
So
stuff
is it
out.
fair to say that they missed some of it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that was really when the county decided to step up to the plate and try to start helping us out.
Mr. Lumen May, who is the county commissioner for District 3, has been very supportive of the plight of the people in Wedgwood, Rolling Hill, and Olive Heights. He has really tried to help them in every way that he could. But again, at our commission, he's the only African American on our county commission, and he only has one vote. So many times he is outvoted from some of the things that he feels are harmful to that community. As long as the people are abiding by what EPA or Florida Department of Environmental Protections say, they go along with it. But what we've said all along is that they don't look at a cumulative effect of what's happening in our community. If that firm is given a rule that they can only admit so much toxin in the air, that's fine, but you're only talking about one. We have 13 in our community. And when you start talking about 13 landfills emitting all that toxic waste, now it becomes detrimental to the community, harmful with our health. It has destroyed property value and things of that nature for the people that live in our community.
Gloria Horning is responsible for helping us get these hydrogen sulfide monitors that we have and the signs that warn people coming through the neighborhood that we have hydrogen sulfide in the air.
I became aware of the Wedgwood, Rolling Hills, Olive Heights community at a county commission meeting once when some folks, Marie Leitner for one, was speaking to me about the problems she was having with her home on Longleaf. And I'm an environmental and social scientist, and it sparked my curiosity. And so I arranged to meet Myra, and she introduced me to other folks in the community. And I did some research and saw the impacts of what I only thought was 11 landfills in their community at the time. Ends up there was 13. Only about 3 or 4 at the time were actually permitted.
So she had some little signs, and she just stuck them on everything that she could get her hands on. And then when we went to one of the commissioners' meeting one night, and she brought it up that they claimed they couldn't get signs, and she showed them one that she had gotten So then next thing you know, they were putting these signs out here. But I think because Gloria is a white lady and she don't back down from anybody, and she just went up there and told them what she felt, and they were treating us the way that they were treating us because we were black, and she didn't care about saying it, and everything that she did to help us came from her heart.
One of the biggest issues, it's not the biggest, they're all huge, but how these landfills got there was through spot zoning. And spot zoning is illegal. And what spot zoning is taking a community like Wedgwood, Rolling Hills, Olive Heights, which is residential, and then saying, oh, but across the street, we're going to make an industrial zone. Landfills are not to be 1,000 feet from the nearest home. These landfills are in the folks' backyard, literally in their backyard. And what's so ironic about this spot zoning and it being illegal and the community never being notified of the zoning changes is they can't get a zone for a grocery store, just for a little, curb store, if you will. No, they can't get that, but they can get landfills. So, and it came out of spot zoning and the county commissioners at that time selling their souls for a profit on landfills.
After hearing what the people of Wedgwood had been through, of course, my next thought was the obvious. When I asked the community leaders what was being done legally, or why they just didn't hire the Levin office, one of the most prolific law firms in this Pensacola area, I was told that they did try to hire Levin, but they were told by the receptionist that no lawyer was interested and that they would just sit back from the sidelines and watch. Now that's a pretty interesting response coming from a law firm.
At the time when we started fighting this landfill, it was taller than any tree over here. And one thing, the regulation actually says that you're supposed to be able to stand on any property in this neighborhood and not see what's going on over there. So the owner at the time, he bought some bamboo trees. Now, you know, he's telling us that there's nothing harmful over there to us, but he bought bamboo trees to cover this whole side. All the trees died. Then he went and bought some pine trees and put them up. All the pine trees died. Then he went and bought some tarp. It's still tarp sitting over there. And he had the tarp tied, the wind came through and blew the tarp down. So it's still just as visible. Now it has been knocked off about half, but that's because the Florida DEP had hired a company to come in to supposedly clean the debris and seal it, cap this place, but they quit in middle of 2016, and which they were supposed to have finished cleaning it up by December 31st, 2016, but it is now 2019 and it's still like it was.
The company that owns the Rolling Hill landfill, which has been one of the biggest sore spots in the community, where actually they had to, the gases emitted were so bad that they had to shut down the community center. The kids couldn't go outside and play because the levels of the hydrogen sulfide was so high that they saw the danger that it was creating with their health And they were told that they had to eventually shut down by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, told them they had to close it down and they had to start remediating it. And they fined them. But what the company did was, if they're an LLC, and an LLC, you can only sue the company and not the people who are involved in the work or who own the actual company. So what they did was they just shut down the LLC and walked away from it. Back in 2017, they were supposed to be taking water samples as well as capping it off so that the water and the like could not get into that they had already placed there. You have to understand that this place had become maybe about a 4 or 5 story high in what they had put into the landfill. And again, they just walked away from it. They walked away from the fines. They walked away from the remediation. They're not doing any of it. The only work that's getting done now is being done by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And it took them since 2017, and this is 2019, to finally find a company who would actually do it at the rate that they were willing to pay.
We don't smell that today. Well, I don't smell it. My nose might not be, I'm what they call it, nose blind. But if it was raining, if it had rained like last night or this morning, we wouldn't be able to sit out here. That smell will kill you. It still is bad. And every time that it does rain, it's something over there explode. It catches on fire.
Really?
It does. They say it's a lot of methane gas over there. And so when the ground gets wet, it builds it up, and then they've had to have the fire department come out several times to put fire out over there.
I talked with someone at the Escambia County Development Services. He reassured me that there are new policies and that the pit owners have to undergo a rigorous and intensive application process in order to be granted land for a C&D or pit. This was to ensure that what happened in Wedgwood and Rolling Hills will never happen again. But what happens if the pit or the landfill predates the new policy, such as the Rolling Hills C&D landfill did?
The folks in the Wedgwood community, they've been fighting now for 6 years for something that's actually been going on for 13. There's long political ties to all of these landfills, from state offices to county offices to even city offices. And so the fight was deep political pockets, which the community of Wedgwood doesn't have. And so what we had to do is we had to do some heavy duty research. And what we found was that the one particular pit that we're speaking of, the South Palafox Properties pit, which is also known as the Rolling Hills C&D landfill, from the day they opened until 7 years into their first 7 years of operation, had 17 violations, 7 consecutive years, with absolutely no, without any, retribution. So we started collecting that data. And what we also did is we looked at other landfills that have been closed in the communities in Escambia County and in Santa Rosa County. And I discovered there was 2. One in Santa Rosa was called Coyote, in a prominently white community. And the other one is called Softly Field, which is in Escambia, also in a prominently white community. And so we asked for a health report and a survey report from the Department of Health. And their report reflected that the hydrogen sulfide that was coming from the landfill and the other toxic elements were not a threat to the community. Well, I took the other two health reports that they did for Softly Field and Coyote. Our numbers were twice, 3 times, and 4 times as high as those of Softly Field and Coyote. And I challenged the health director and the Department of Environmental Protection and our environmental group from the county. How can 2 other landfills have not nearly the numbers of toxicity, and you find that a health hazard, but not for the one in Rolling Hills? And the only thing I can conclude is it's because it's an African American community that doesn't have big political pockets and big bank accounts that can take on state representatives, local representatives, and the people that are helping the state representatives and the local representatives, if you get my drift. So day after day, week after week, we fought for 6 years. And the landfill was supposed to be closed 2 years ago, almost 3 now. It's still not closed. Softly Field was closed and capped and won an award within 2 years of the first smell. Department of Environmental Protection, what they've given us so far is a website so we can now watch what's not being done. And that's their way of communicating with the Wedgwood community, which is not communicating with them at all.
I'm Judy Cook, a resident of the Wedgwood Homeowners Association. Been out here since 1977. I lost my husband to kidney failure, my neighbors to kidney failure and cancer. My daughter is 41 right now, living in Atlanta, and hopefully on Monday she will go under some kind of surgery. And I also have neighbors who are dying. Miss Powell's 27-year-old granddaughter is 6 months pregnant and was diagnosed with breast cancer on last Wednesday. There are more cancer patients out here. Mr. and Mrs. Roberts, homeowners out here, had to move and they still died. Both of them died with cancer. She also had renal failure. So I'm saying, when is it going to quit? When are we going to be able to breathe? When are we going to be able to drink the water? They said they were going to test the water. They have not given me the results of the testing of the water yet. But the scientist that assessed the water said that he will not. We asked him if he would drink the water. He said, I won't drink it myself. So why would we give it to 150 children in this city? We've been to the commissioner's office, and Mr. May can't do it all by himself. We need every commission down there to be concerned about the citizens of this community. We were here before the pits, so we just asked them to clean them up.
That's how I got to be in this position that I'm in right now. Back in 2014, when we first started doing all of this, the Homeowners Association started a committee, the landfill committee. And because I was the secretary, well, actually I wasn't the secretary back then, but Judy had been selected to be the chairman of the committee because she was real outspoken. Judy sang everywhere. She had mentioned at that time that she had sang at 40 funerals between February and June of people in this neighborhood that year. And so that just tell you the people just dying like flies. So Judy was the chairperson, and then her friend Aaron Wiley, he was the co-chair, and then I was the secretary. Well, like I say, Judy has had 3 strokes, and she's in the nursing home, and she can't take care of herself. So then Aaron couldn't step up because Aaron had had a massive heart attack, and his children sent for him to come. They moved him back up to Detroit. He died 2 months ago, and then that left me. So I'm the only one from our committee that is still here. So that's why I'm still the voice.
The truth of the matter is that landfill particularly has, and then the borrow pits to a lesser degree, has impacted the community. I did a informal survey to find out that many people have had cancers, they have COPD, they have renal failure, and it's most prominent with the houses that are on the front line. Matter of fact, out here on the street, Wagner, that is closest to the landfill. I know the lady and her husband, they used to work at Wedgwood Middle School, Miss Barbara Robbins. She died from cancer-related issues or cancer, and her husband had a illness too, and they wouldn't have been any older than 60 something now. They're both dead, been dead now for 10 or so years. A classmate of mine, Dawn Dubose, who lived next door to the Robbins, she would be 50 something, but she died after first having breast cancer and then lung cancer. So those 2 houses have had a direct impact, and then a couple houses from there, I didn't know them as well, but Mr. and Mrs. Locke, she died in that house and he moved. So there were direct correlations to proximity to the pit and to the number of people who had cancer and who have died from cancer. And then indirectly, what you have is you have the number of trucks that come in and out of the community, and how that carbon dioxide, that odorless gas that gets in your tissues and poisons you from the inside out, has affected people. And I think on one of the corners, that Wingfoot and Rolling Hills, where they used to stop all the time before they could turn left or right at that T, the people who used to live on that corner, they are deceased. And you have a new family that lives in there now, but that's from that constant carbon dioxide gas being right there, part of the greenhouse gas effect. So those really are the main things. And one of the other indirect ways that it affects people in the older community, as they say, they buy bottled water now. So being on a fixed income, in addition to buying your medicines and your groceries, you have to buy bottled water. Now they say the water is safe, but the perception of the community is that the water is not safe.
You know, could the water that's in the ground get into our drinking water? You know, I don't know because I just know that. And see, we just started talking about water, but the people living in those communities, they used to have big gardens and plant their own food. They can't do that anymore because not only is the water ruined, but the soil is ruined because those chemicals that are flowing through the water, coming in through the water, once it goes in the soil, now it's in the soil. Now, if they go out and plant a big garden and the things that they grow, they're going to have some of that toxic waste in that they're eating.
The health out here is very bad. I myself, I'm military. I'm retired military. Well, I retired at the age of 36 with 2 small children. And since I've been back, I've had been diagnosed with diabetes, breast cancer, a heart condition. I have coronary artery disease. I've had to have a triple bypass. It collapsed. It didn't work because of the stuff that I'm breathing. We all have issues out here.
Because hydrogen sulfide gas stays low to the ground, where the children are. It makes the soil toxic, where they're kicking it up and playing, and licking wiping their nose with their dirty hands that has arsenic on them, or lead particles. The kids going to school there. How can they study when they have hundreds upon hundreds of diesel trucks driving by? The hydrogen sulfide is so high at Longleaf Elementary School that the kids couldn't go outside and play. And it's the furthest school away from the landfill. It's impacting these children. I talked to the school board. I said, these children don't have behavioral problems. They have health issues. The hydrogen sulfide and diesel air gets into their brains and in their bodies. They can't think straight. They can't concentrate. They can't focus. Well, when you can't do that as a child and can't say, well, I don't feel good, automatically they say, well, they've got a learning issue. Well, I'm sure they do, but what is causing that? It's, when you have it more in one school than anywhere else. And I looked at the grades at Longleaf, and starting in 3rd grade, they're very, very good. 4th grade, they start dropping off. 5th grade, they start dropping off. And 6th grade, they're in the dump. And you can't tell me that's not environmental impact. And that's what we need to see, that it's just not the immediate impact on those beautiful people and my friends, and some I consider family, that I'm losing, weekly, monthly, because of some type of COPD, renal failure, and those other diseases that coincide with all of these toxins that they're being forced to breathe and be around. Imagine the impact on the children. And that will stay with the children's DNA for their entire life, and it'll go into their children's DNA. So we'll never, ever be rid of the environmental toxins, and those little bodies will continue to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
When we were taking legal action against this landfill, the owner at that time was not too happy with us, and expressed that we didn't know what he had over here in this landfill, and we probably would never know what is over there. But what we do know is that we had a school right over here. First it was a high school, then it turned into a middle school, and then they closed it down completely because they said that it was full of asbestos. And they tore that school down and took the school, all the debris from the school, and put it in this landfill over here. So we do know that asbestos is over there, but what else, we don't know.
I'm a student at Florida A&M University, and we were taking a course, an environmental public health and environmental course. And in that class, they say this is what they put in poor minority communities: pits and landfills. And I came home back in 2013, and I said, what is that? And they said that was a landfill. And I couldn't believe that they thought Wedgwood was a poor minority community, and that was the first thing that struck me. But from there, that's how we got involved, and we've stayed involved ever since then to say that we're not poor. This is the same neighborhood that I was raised in, same neighborhood that took me all over the world and did everything that I'm, so fortunate and blessed to do.
Interstate 10 is a beacon of landfills that are disproportionately in African American and low income communities because they don't have a voice. The BP spill disaster, all the tar waste and all of the waste ended up, some of it in Wedgwood, most of it in Mariana in a black community. That's very toxic. And this is what's happening across America. The people who benefit the least from cleanup are the ones that are on the receiving end of that cleanup.
We work with both social, economic, and environmental justice in our community, and looking at how we can help those who are in need. We work with another organization out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Deep South Center for Environmental Justice is also working with the Wedgwood, Rolling Hill, and Olive Heights communities, because their main function is to work with people who've been mistreated environmentally.
Environmental racism is the denial of a healthy environment for people of color, African Americans, Latinos, Indigenous Native Americans, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders in the United States, but also people of color around the world. You see this racially disparate effect where the places where people who look like you and me and other black, brown people around the world, where we live, where we work, where we play, places of worship, are in the midst of some of the most toxic environmental conditions. Here in the United States, where I work in Louisiana, outside of the windows of the homes of African American residents, you can see a towering oil refinery. You don't see that kind of industrial development in and near, on the most part, predominantly white communities. And so the disproportionality really plays out in this way. And this, of course, using the United States, again, as an example, 79% of predominantly African American neighborhoods have polluted air, unhealthy polluted air, 79%. And when you consider that as a racial group, African Americans are anywhere between 11 or 12% of the national population, how is it that we get most of the polluting facilities, most of the contaminated sites? That is an evidence of environmental racism, and this is something we live with every day. And so looking at the cause is extremely important, as much as looking at the effects and how they land in our neighborhoods and the places that we call home. And when we look at the causes, we see that there's this governmental construct, framework that is set up that actually allows, permits, and incentivizes toxic industrial developments, mining, extractive industries, refineries, chemical manufacturers, waste sites, heavy transportation traffic routes in our neighborhoods and in the places that we call home. And so that's, when you look at both the cause and effect, you see that it's a systemic institutional problem that is actually driving environmental racism, and the effects, of course, being, or the consequences, of course, being shorter lifespan, unhealthy status, where, from asthma, cancer, reproductive disorders, internal organ diseases, are all attributable to the toxic pollution that's in and around our homes. I'll give you the example of a community here in New Orleans where in the late 60s and early 70s, young African-American families and couples were really attracted to this new home development. And this is, of course, on the tail end of the civil rights movement and people beginning to see achievement and progress and some, just rapid ways happening. And so being your own, owning your own property and coming into this kind of sense of place and ownership and control over your life and being able to gain and wealth and in the process was something that was now available for the first time for many folks. And so they bought these homes and began living in them, moving in. In fact, there was a big celebration for the first home buyers with a parade and with a young the children marching along down the new streets that were paved in this new subdivision. And so it was just a sense of celebration. But soon after they arrived and moved in, they began noticing some peculiarities that when they tried to garden, they would see rubbish like old cans or discarded plates and broken things kind of just in the soil, not that far beneath the soil. From there, as children began to grow they began noticing nosebleeds among children, tumor growth, cancer. And as the neighbors began talking and sharing notes, it began to raise alarm among them that why are our children suffering? Why are we noticing problems health-wise? And what again is going on? Why is the soil filled with all this litter? And it was only when they began to organize around the concern, around the health problems and how their children were suffering, that they began to dig and fight for some answers as to what is this place where their homes were built. And through that process and that struggle, they came to discover that their homes were built on one of the largest city municipal waste dumps called the Agriculture Street landfill. And that when their homes were built, the land in no way had any remediation. They were just built on top of the dump as it existed. It brought in a response from the EPA to come in and test the soil. And what they found was that there was over 144 toxic hazardous chemicals that extended from the surface all the way to 17 feet below ground. Residents sued the various governmental entities that were part of the development of the subdivision, that included the city government. So they brought lawsuits, and those lawsuits lasted for more than just for years. And they finally were settled just a few years ago. The result of the lawsuit was that the residents won, but it wasn't enough for relocation. So all of the various governmental entities, city government, the local housing urban development office, the school board were all found responsible for the damage done of building homes and a school on a former waste dump. But the judgment that resolved this wound up being too little to actually secure the relocation of residents. So we're talking like $4,000, $11,000. So to this day, residents are still on this dump some 40 years later.
It's difficult to see that the injustices that my neighborhood has been facing is common all over this country. What would make anybody think that African American people or people of color want to live in a garbage can? I wanted to see those pits for myself, so I asked Ms. Woods to take me on a tour, and that journey was indeed disturbing. We start first with Ms. Woods showing me one of the air monitoring units that have been installed around the neighborhood. Then we move to the site where Rolling Hills C&D once operated.
right through where that tree is, diagonal this way. Look this way. You see it green hanging up there?
Okay. Okay, let me see if I can zoom in on it. Okay.
You see it?
Okay.
And that's where those poles that are up there, that's what they had those poles for, to put that tarp all the way down. And the wind came through the first day they put it out there and blew it away. 2014, when we had that big flood.
Yes, ma'am.
The landfill, the water barrier broke and came straight through the middle of this lady's house right here. And everything in there got washed out into the front yard. And then since then, the house has caught on fire and they don't live here anymore. It's that one, Little Zion. It's where the third monitor. This is a little waterway where the runoff from the landfill, the water comes through right there. On the other side of this fence right here is Marcus Point Golf Course. You see those houses through the trees? Can you see them?
I can.
But they don't want anybody to know that they're that close to that landfill.
How come they're not standing up with you?
Because they don't want their property value to go down. If everybody knew that they were that close and they were getting the same thing that we're getting, then their property values would drop also. And just as you go around this curve is Shortleaf. And Shortleaf was an extraction facility, and they have asked the county commissioners to give them a permit to do construction and demolition. So they're ready to fill up their hole. They got a nice big hole down there. You can see part of it. And I'm going to take you on the back side of it. You probably can't see it anymore because they put some trees up.
Yes, ma'am.
But right around the corner from my house is the other end of this landfill here. But they really want to let them fill it up with garbage.
Wow. That's huge.
Yes, it's huge. And they did this, got all this like that in a short time, because it was not like this in 2014. They hadn't even got started. But since 2014, this is what they've done.
I was gonna say I didn't remember that.
No, they gave them a permit in 2014 to extract dirt. That red clay, then they use it for construction on the roads and foundations for the houses.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they use that for. But now they ready to. We can just put some garbage in there and fill it up. Leave facility. That's a CND facility, but it's not operating. This one, they were trying to get it lined because they gotta have it lined. When I told you that the county commissioners redid the regulations, and one of the things that they put in there was that all of these CND facilities had to be lined, because that's what the major problem for Rolling Hills was, that it was not lined, and that's why everything is now seeping into the ground. So that's what that is, where they are trying to line it over there. And one day they hope to open this back up again. But I'm going to take you up the hill here to one of my friend's home.
Okay.
That she can't live in her house. She's been out of her house since, I think it's been like 10 years now. Her doctor told her, I don't know where you live, but you got to go. You got to move. And that's as soon as possible.
The friend that Miss Woods is referring to owns a house just a block up from where we are now. She begins to tell me a story of how the lady's body was so full of toxins that her x-ray actually glowed.
But if you step right in there, then you can see the landfill that I told the people I told you that I don't mess with them. Their thing is like right across.
The sand.
Yes, a sand pit. That's green fill dirt is there with the white sand, and then waste management is this way. Be careful, because it's supposed to be actually a 500-foot easement from those landfills to someone's house or to their property.
Okay.
And I want you to see how close 500 feet to them.
For you, the viewer, to get a better understanding of what I'm seeing, I created this display. All pit and landfill companies are required to have at least a 500-foot easement between their dig and someone else's property. This is how far some of these companies have come with their mining. Can you imagine having a 75 to 80-foot drop behind your back gate? Now imagine it was not there when you bought the house. And this right here is a broken fence.
This lady here been having problems with homeless people breaking in her house here and tearing up everything.
Yeah, I see all the trash everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
She had a nice house.
Mm-hmm. And she lives off of Blue Angel now in an apartment. So she's paying on this house and living in an apartment because she can't live in her house. This is Sunbelt right here. This is the rock crushing place. Looks like they're not open today. But this is where they crush rocks.
What we found with the rock crushing, once they start crushing the rocks, a dust will emit from the rocks, and that dust is called silica. And silica dust is a cancer-causing agent.
In a residential area or in a school district area where you've got 3 schools, elementary school, 2 high schools, and a vocational technical school right there within 200 feet. And even if you say that there is no problems like these in young people don't materialize for 10 to 20 years. And so by the time you identify it as a problem, these little people will be gone somewhere else and not know what triggered this, what caused that. Well, you could say that it's caused by being in the proximity to breathing that bad air.
At the commissioners' meeting, the chairman of the commissioners at that time was Grover Robinson, and he asked the staff to go out and see if they can find some land that was not anywhere near any housing developments or neighborhoods, and if they could negotiate a purchase of this land, which they had planned to swap. They were going to move Sunbelt to this property, Sunbelt and Shortleaf. Those two places were going to move from where they are located to the new property, and then the Escambia County would take over this property. Well, they said that would happen within the year. They gave them a temporary permit to keep operating until that transaction happened. Well, they just recently renewed their permit within the last 2 months, and that purchase did not happen. And they put this fence up here. They claim that this fence is going to keep the dust, the silica dust, from going to the school. Now, I can see holes through there. Now, you're going to tell me, how can the dust not go through those holes? And that's what bales of hay. They got these bales of hay supposedly to keep this silica dust down there too. And they put some down on the side where that waterway is.
They're not even trying. They're not even trying.
But they say it's not harmful to our children.
Show me how close the school is.
I'm fixing to show you just right now. This is Wymart Road, and you see right there. This is Georgetown Technical Center and West Florida High School right here. The only thing separate the school and the rock crushing place is this little road right here. This is it. This is the first school. This is school number 1, or school 1 and 2, I should say. This is the front of the schools. See that sign? West Florida High School and Georgetown Career Center. Okay? 1 and 2. Now here's number 3 right here. This is Pine Forest High School. This is school number 3. They have a football field over there. The kids play football. They have the band, basketball, all that right outside here in that silica dust. Now, when you get right here to this light, don't come past this light, that's school number 4 right there. That's the elementary school, Longleaf Elementary School, right there. And they say our children are not in danger. Okay, so now you had 4 schools, and then just past the schools right here is right over here is This is a ballpark for the kids. They have baseball, football, soccer, all right here. This is a ball complex for our youth. The children, little league football and basketball, football and baseball and soccer right here. Right next to the 4 schools. Yes, all of our children are in danger. And we have a lot of stuff going on down this way, but the houses down on this side here are the ones that are in danger from eager beaver. These are the people down in here that have bullet holes in their houses.
Miss Woods tells me that the pit called the eager beaver has now become a problem. Not because of toxins, but because every weekend some people go into the pit and they shoot off guns. Many of her neighbors have suffered bullet holes in their homes. Not to mention the blast from eager beavers mining has also shifted foundations for many of these houses as well.
And I'm gonna show you landfill. Well, it's not a landfill, but a sand pit down this way. See, there's a little lake right there. That's not really a lake. That's a
oh my God.
Let me see if this is the place that's supposed to turn in. But you got these people here. This is actually water from one of the sand pits where it has just rained and the water has just...
Keep in mind that what you're seeing is not a natural lake. It's not a natural pond.
This water is contaminated. It's got all kind of chemicals in it. We don't know exactly what. But if you go around that bend there where the water is, that ends up on Wingfoot Way. And that's where it's the pit over there that they used to dig sand out of, but they can't dig anything else out of there, so they've just let it fill up with water. And that's what we got here.
Wow. And that's all contaminated?
It's all contaminated.
It's not even a river?
Nope. Nope. I think a lot of the stuff was down here, but they was quiet. I think so. I guess it must be time for these people to lock up this stuff down here. But see how blue and pretty that water is down there? Now this is the pit that the young man fell off in.
While I was producing this video, a young 15-year-old boy fell 75 feet into this pit. Thank God the boy survived, but it took emergency personnel all night long to rescue him. The boy was trespassing, and he was at fault, but there probably shouldn't be a 75-foot pit in your neighborhood.
But he really, to me, had no business over here. He would have had to have jumped the fence to get there.
Yeah.
But, you know, he was a young man, a little kid.
Did he die?
No, he didn't die. But children will be children.
Sure will. Where are you? Well, I bet that's life-changing.
I bet you he won't come back over here.
So 6 years into the closing, and we think we're getting somewhere. They promise us it's going to be closed, it's going to be capped, only to find out that a state road is now going through there. Well, let me correct myself. It's not a state road anymore. Years ago, they wanted to put a state road through there, and it got pushed down because of the issues pertaining to South Palafox properties and / Rolling Hills landfill. And it was tabled, and the state said, we're not doing this. Letters did go out, though, wanting to buy the properties, pennies on the dollar. Then, so we didn't hear about it again, and the last meeting they had at the Wedgwood Community Center, one of the citizens that lived there asked Escambia County, one of the representatives, and I have it on tape, is the road still going to go through here? And he said, no, not at all. Not a month later, maybe 2 months, a little iffy on the dates, but it wasn't more than 2 months later, on a 9 o'clock meeting on September 19th, June 19th, June 17th, a road's going through.
It was because I have no issue whatsoever with running that road right through that community. But I know that you ran into some issues with running it, keeping it going toward 29, so you weren't ready on your end. Well, I'm ready to go yesterday on my end, and that was the reason we moved the money.
Well, candidly, we're ready to go right now. I mean, we got a Rolling Hills deal where that road's supposed to go through. I mean, and there's some actions that's life or death issues that are happening in Wedgwood, and I need to be putting in.
So you want to continue that all the way through?
I don't want to continue the road. I mean, there's a lot that I'm going to have to do with the landfills.
Okay, but we're talking about a road project here. We're talking about running it longleaf all the way through to 29.
I understand that, Jeff.
And you want to move forward with that?
No, I'm not going to move forward. Okay. We can't. There's not enough money.
So, county commissioners want to put a road right through the middle of Wedgwood. Is it a coincidence that residents are already receiving offers on their homes? And it'll be pretty easy to purchase them too, for pennies on a dollar, since the landfills have made these property values next to nothing.
The hope is right now that with the Wedgwood community, by stopping or slowing down the process of the road coming through, we found out that we have about $13 million that have been allocated to the County Commissioner Lumina May, which we are planning on addressing with him in the coming weeks as to what we can do with that funding to help the Wedgwood community.
We've always said we're business-minded people too. We understand business. We don't want anybody to lose their livelihood. And so we partly blame the county for not having regulations to where you can create this as an industry. Put it in the woods or somewhere where it is not grown up, and businesses can come around it who can support it with the peripheral businesses, just like Car City. Car City sells cars, but you got auto mechanics around there, you've got detailing shops around there, you've got window tinting, just the other businesses that go with the big auto industry are there in close proximity. So if you build that industry somewhere where it can grow, then it can prosper and it can be what you want it to be here in Escambia County, but it should never be in our backyards. Our quality of life should not suffer because somebody else wants to profit over our ability to live a peaceable life in our community.
We had 60 international and national journalists come out here to Wedgwood, and they did national and international stories on it. But it just falls on deaf ear here. We've covered it. We know. But they don't know the impact. And the bigger impact is, and this is what I try to tell the folks that are downstream, just because you can't see ground zero doesn't mean it's not impacting you. It's not impacting you as it is directly to the Wedgwood, Rolling Hills, Olive Heights communities, but it's in the water. It's in our water table where we get our drinking water, where you get your drinking water. It's in the bayou where you fish and swim and ski. It's in a Crescent Lake where you ski and jet ski and stuff like that. And then it goes right into Perdido Bay. It's just not the paper mill polluting out there. It's 11 landfills that are built next to bayous and so-called protected wetlands.
If you would like to join me in helping the people of Wedgwood, Rolling Hills, and Olive Heights, please contact the number below on your screen. Thank you so much, and may God bless you. And to all of you who could help these communities, these people, and you're choosing not to, keep this in mind. History and God Himself will be your judge. Good night and good luck.